I'm Mady. Thank you. Really excited to be here. This is the last talk before lunch. I know how those go, so we'll try to get you out of here soon enough. But until then, we'll talk about play therapy, what it is, how we built an app using NLP machine learning to provide mental health support to parents and families, and how just 5 minutes a day can bring so much joy to families, right? We'll dive into the architecture of Happypillar. We'll talk about all of its tech components, and then we'll also, leave room for some questions. So I have a pretty traditional tech background. I studied math and computer science. I spent my entire career in product and engineering. I built intelligent search products, information retrieval systems, focused a lot on NLP, specifically conversational AI. I worked at startups, did consulting for a little bit, and then I just kind of missed the chaos of a startup and building. So I joined a conversational AI company, which is where I met Scott. And it's also where I met my co-founder, Sam. She was heading up customer success at the time. This was about 3 years ago, so right before the pandemic. And this was also around the time that I moved to Texas to be closer to my family. I am not Sam likes to say I'm not a child haver. Any of you here have kids? Okay, wow, lots of parents, that's great. So I'm not a child haver. I have a sister though, she has a son, so I enjoy spending a lot of time with my nephew. So Sam and I just became friends. She's really easy to get along with. I wish she were here so you can meet her. And we started talking about the challenges of parenting. And because I was living closer to my sister and spending time with my nephew, I also got to see up front the challenges of parenting, especially during a pandemic. So Sam was facing some similar issues with her kid, Winston, and she did something called parent-child interaction therapy. It's talk-based, it's play-based, it's non-invasive, and it worked amazingly well for her, right? She likes to talk about how the results were like magic. But the thing is, it was hella expensive, and it was incredibly hard to access. And the thing is, it's not a unique problem. Young children right now are facing a mental health crisis. There's 1 in 5 kids, sadly, that have some kind of mental, emotional, or behavioral disorder. And it's been around for a while, but things have certainly gotten worse during the pandemic because of COVID and because of the chaos and unrest in kids' lives. It wasn't necessarily easy for me growing up as a gay kid and also as a child of immigrants. And as not easy as that was sometimes, it's way harder for kids now going through all of this chaos, gun violence, and the lack of safety in our schools. I know we're all kind of thinking about Nashville, but my nephew just said to me a couple of days ago that he was kind of getting sick of, the school shooting drills. And he was like, I just don't want to do this stuff anymore. When is the real thing going to happen? Is the real thing going to happen? He's 8, so obviously he doesn't fully understand what that means, but I can't imagine that other kids aren't thinking this, that other parents aren't necessarily worried about something like this. So gun violence and the pandemic and other stressful things definitely changed the way that we parent. The solution is behavioral therapy. It's unanimously recommended by experts. It's non-invasive. It can be play-based or talk-based, but there are a few problems with it. It's very inaccessible. It's very expensive. Sam was spending close to $1,000 a month. And even if you can afford something like that, not everyone has the time to take out an hour or two a week, multiple hours, going to therapy, doing therapy with their kids. And even if you have the time and the money to do that, nearly every clinician these days has a wait list of over 2 years. Those are definitely some problems here, even though this is incredibly effective. So, we're at the golden age of AI. Everyone is doing incredible things. Just at this venue you have Jasper, and I think in a little while you'll be speaking to Ron Green, companies doing incredible things with generative AI that actually move the needle on helping companies, people, and teams, right? So we wanted to find a solution to this that focused on the accessibility, on making this scalable using a one-to-many relationship with therapists, and we wanted to make it affordable. So we decided to build an AI and human-powered platform that provides instant access to behavioral therapy. And I know what you're thinking. We're all probably thinking the same thing. AI and mental health, like what, chatbot therapists, everything that could potentially go wrong can go wrong. Everyone in this room here knows about generative AI when unchecked can be particularly damaging, especially when it comes to mental health. But, so we spent a lot of time thinking about the right kind of approach. And the way that play therapy works is this. You see a therapist, they onboard you onto the skills of how to do this kind of therapy. They ask you to spend 5 minutes a day with your kid, 5 minutes of play uninterrupted, where the kid leads the play. And they give you certain guidelines to follow. And then once a week, they watch you interact with your kid and they provide feedback. And the guidelines are this. So you're supposed to narrate their behavior 10 times. So I can say something like, I see that some of you are taking notes. I see that some of you are watching me talk about therapy. And you're supposed to do that 10 times. You're supposed to celebrate their behavior 10 times. So you might say something like, Scott, thank you for being so generous with your time and just being a great product manager when we work together, right? We're supposed to imitate their play and we're supposed to echo back what they say. So you might say something like, if your kid says, my car's going really fast. So you might say something like, yeah, your car really is zooming, right? And within these 5 minutes, you're not supposed to ask questions. You're not supposed to give commands or do any kind of negative talk or criticism. It sounds kind of sophomoric, like very simplistic, but it's been around since the 1940s. It has tons of evidence and research behind it. And when you perform these guidelines consistently, it decreases tantrums, decreases meltdowns, helps with issues following directions, negotiation before bedtime, all of these things that kids typically face. And a therapist gives you feedback once a week. They're like, okay, well, you've celebrated your kid's behavior 7 times. Why don't you try to get that up to 10? You've asked 5 questions, and here's how you can rephrase your questions as statements. And so what we're doing at Happypillar is something similar. We do have an in-house therapist. We have a clinical advisory board that created the program and methodology behind Happypillar. They instruct you on how to do this kind of therapy. And then instead of the therapist listening to you interact with your kid once a week, we record the interaction every time you play with your kid, every time you hit record. We analyze that and provide you feedback on how well you did. The feedback is pre-vetted by a therapist, so it's therapist-led and vetted, even though we are using NLP and recommender systems, which we'll get into in a little bit. But the feedback is instantaneous. It's 24/7. Therapy is not rationed in any way, and you could use it whenever you want, and the time commitment is 5 minutes a day. So let's talk a little bit about the architecture of Happypillar. The primary user interface is a mobile application. That's how users interact with the app. We use Flutter to support both iOS and Google Play. How many of you have experience submitting to the App Store or Google Play or been working on mobile apps? Okay, yeah. When you've done enterprise for so long, or B2B enterprise for so long, you kind of forget how complicated it can be to submit to the App Store and work on Google Play compliance and App Store compliance. So yeah, if you're building apps, I'd say get started with the submission process right away. Anything to do with payments or in-app purchases can be pretty intense and complicated. So we record on the mobile app. The recordings are anonymized, and we'll talk about security in a little bit. They're then sent to the backend inference engine. So the inference engine sits behind an elastic load balancer. The load balancer, the main purpose is, we all know what it does. It takes a look at the incoming requests. It distributes them across a fleet of inference engines, so we have multiple instances of that. The inference engine is exposed using a REST API. We built that using Fast API in Python, even though I know that Ian wasn't a big fan of Python earlier. It works. And in the database, we send some of the recordings, which are encrypted. We also store things like a happy score, which is basically a snapshot of how well you did during the therapy session with your kid, and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about the inference engine. There's multiple components to this. It has multiple modules. The first component is the SDT, speech to text. It has two responsibilities. The first is to convert the speech into text, and we use Whisper for SDT. We experimented with a bunch of tools. Whisper was pretty good. And the second responsibility is diarization. So diarization essentially means we're trying to identify the adult speaker and the child speaker. And the reason we do this is because we want to only analyze the adult speech. We really try not to do anything with the child speech at all. Another kind of thing that we're keeping, like being mindful of for security reasons. We thought that it would be kind of easy to do diarization, and it is for the most part. We use SpeechBrain for that, but we'll get into some of the challenges and approaches we took in a little bit. The second component is the sentence classifier. So remember all of the things that you're supposed to do and not supposed to do. We call them nice skills and not now skills. We pass them through a sentence classifier. We feed the adult utterances to it. It identifies the intents and entities. We use, a combination of open source NLU, some homegrown technology, and they're built on top of LLMs. For one of the skills specifically, for echo, we use sentence similarity. Specifically, we use semantic textual similarity to see how similar the two phrases are. So that's a little bit about the inference engine. All of the utterances or all of the recordings pass through the SDT, then the sentence classifier, then sentence similarity for echoes, then we analyze, we generate some feedback, and we send that back to the user. So overall, here's a high-level process flow. We instruct our users on how to conduct this kind of therapy session with your kid. We record the interaction, convert it into text, analyze it, and then give them a feedback almost instantaneously within 5 to 6 seconds. So yeah, let's talk about all of these components. The first thing we do is we instruct parents within the app, just like a therapist would in a therapy session. We make all of the instructions kind of interactive, and we use short-form content, bite-sized videos. We walk you through what play therapy is, how to, what nice skills are, how to perform each of the components of a nice skill and a not now skill. We experimented with this. We had long-form content before, but we very quickly got some user feedback that was like, hey, this is too long. I don't know if I can watch a 10-minute video on how to do this and then do therapy with my kid at the end of a full day's worth work. No one really wants to watch a lecture on therapy. So short-form content really worked. Interactive content where you're nudged to do some practice sessions. You get some quizzes that you could do either with voice or text. Really helped with engagement. Recording is pretty simple. Users just kind of hit record within the app. They use their phones to record it. We will expand into iPads and other devices soon, but right now I think phones work just fine. Okay, so, and then we diarize, right? So we use SpeechBrain for diarization. It's an open source technology. It works great. So initially we thought meeting transcription services, what they do is essentially identify different adult speakers in a room, and they assign, they tag each adult, and they can even, assign to-dos. They do a summary. It's great. And so we were like, okay, well, it must be so much easier trying to identify an adult and a child because they sound so different. But one of the issues that we immediately ran into was that a child and a female speaker can sound pretty similar. So we were like, okay, well, that's not really going to work. So we tried to look at something like requiring users to record a voice note, a sample, so then we can tag that as the adult. And that's kind of friction-y, Not everyone wants to record a voice sample before they can even get through the onboarding flow. So right now we're using a combination of something called formant frequencies, which looks at the frequency of the adult and the child speaker. Children typically have higher frequencies. They have greater temporal and spectral variability than adults. It works, I would say, it's about 80 to 85% accurate in our experience. So we're trying to experiment with other approaches that would be more accurate. So if any of you have experience with diarization or have any kind of advice for me, would love to hear it. Oh, I meant to say that we spoke with our friends at Avoma, which is a meeting transcription service. So we looked at tools like Avoma. Speech Brain works really well for us. One of the things that Avoma does is that they follow a buffet-like approach where they look at different tools and they use different tools. So they're like, this particular tool is better when it comes to accents. And this vendor is better when it comes to things like noise. So we're currently trying to use multiple tools as opposed to just like a one solution fits all. The next thing we do is convert it to text. We use Whisper. It works pretty well with our diarization techniques. The way that we do this is we chop up our recordings into multiple segments. So we have 0 to 10 seconds, we have 11 to 20, and so forth. And each segment is kind of tagged with who the speaker is or who the speakers are, and whether that's adult or child. And then we parse through the segments, and then we send it to our sentence classifier to analyze. So at this phase, sentence classification, what we do is we try to identify the intents and extract any kind of applicable entities. The intents are narration, celebration. For echo, we use sentence similarity, so I'll talk about that in a little bit. Questions, commands, negative talk are all intents. We don't really have to deal with entities too much, but when we do, we use Spacey. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Spacey. Also open source, also great. And for semantic textual similarity, for echo, we try to calculate how similar the two sentences are. So we convert the text into embeddings that capture semantic information, and we try to see how close in distance the two sentences are. For this, we use SBERT, which is a sentence transformer. And it works pretty great. So after we get the analysis, we try to capture how many narrations you did. We give you basically a count of all of it, and then we send it to the feedback engine. Feedback is produced in two ways. We display like an actual readout of how many narrations, celebrations, echoes, questions, etc. that you did, and then we also kind of aggregate that and calculate a score. It's called a happy score. And it's a snapshot of how well you did. And you have access to historical happy scores, and we're able to bubble up some really interesting insights. As you keep using the app, it gets even more personalized and tailored to your use case. So let's say you and your kid wanted to work on tantrums or managing big feelings. You can kind of see how well you're doing, look at your progress over time, and then once you're done with that, you can move on to another thing that you want to work on together. So let's take a look at what this looks like within the app. We tell you how to do each of these rituals. Imitation, celebration, like we talked about. We tell you how you can avoid asking questions, which is, pretty hard because we ask kids so many questions during the day. Criticism, commands, you can watch videos. So that's a little bit about the flow. And here's what the feedback looks like specifically. Here's the happy score, which is a snapshot of your performance and a breakdown of how you did. And, we're currently working on providing personalized recommendations, something that's more actionable for each parent unit. We use a combination of collaborative filtering and content-based recommendations to provide these. And right now, we're trying to find the right balance between anonymizing the data and having access to enough attributes so that we could build a more effective and accurate collaborative filtering system. It's a fine balance to tread. We certainly want to be mindful of security here. But we do want to surface recommendations like you've asked 7 questions. Here's exactly how, Samantha, you can rephrase your questions as statements. Or, I've seen that you've done 5 celebrations, but there really were other opportunities within this transcript, as you can see here, to do more celebrations. So we want this to be like an interactive learning journey that you do with your kids. But we're in the process of building out our recommendation engine right now. So again, if you have any thoughts on how to build something that's, effective collaborative engine that doesn't require using too much of our parents' data, I would love to hear it. One of the things that we found, so we started Happypillar about a year ago in February of 2022. We were still working at this conversational AI company with Scott and Sam. Sam and I quit our jobs in May. We worked evenings and weekends. It was hard, but it was so much fun. And we found out right away that we don't have access to a lot of seed data. You don't have publicly available parent-child interaction data. That's a great thing. But it also meant that we had to do a lot of building from scratch. We had to start collecting data from scratch. We also found out that, hey, why don't we just build an MVP right away, ship it out to people that we know, our network, and get them to use it and collect data that way, right? And we posted in one Facebook mom group. Facebook mom groups are so incredibly loyal and engaged. I had no idea. I'm not even on Facebook. But Sam posted, and I think within a couple of hours, we got 60 people saying, yeah, my kid is a monster. I would love to use this kind of thing. How can I get on it right away? And within 2 hours, our first alpha was filled already. We had people using it. We used that data to make our models better, but we also got their feedback to make the app itself better. We released our second alpha in April. Same thing. We posted in a Facebook mom group, a different one. We had 70 people wanting to use it right away. We got their data. We made the models better. And over the course of the next few months, we released a private beta and then a public beta as well. We've had over 3,000 downloads so far, pretty good engagement rate, and over 13,000 minutes of proprietary data. That made our models a lot better. We use like I said, large-scale language models. So we do a fair bit of prompt engineering as well, which, I'm glad everyone's talking about prompt engineering right now. It's great to see that everyone's super interested in it. It's crucial to tweak your prompts to make sure that they're as succinct and as specific as possible. So we do a lot of that. We also built an internal tool that we kind of exposed to our clinical advisory team. They kind of use our tool to work on the prompt engineering themselves. So it's really great to have subject matter experts do the prompt engineering for you rather than having engineers do it, because they can work on the prompt, and Chloe, our in-house therapist, will listen to transcripts. She'll manually code the utterances herself, and she's like, okay, well, here's my feedback and readout, and then she'll compare that to our models, and we try to make sure that they're as close to each other as possible. Thanks to the data that we have, we match therapist accuracy, which is at about 86%, and we're confident that as we continue to keep building the app out, as we collect more data, we'll try to make that even more accurate. So security is pretty top of mind for Happypillar. We were kind of shocked to know that mental health apps are not regulated at all. Obviously you have to think of GDPR compliancy and things like that, but they're not regulated in a way that you think that they would be. But we didn't want that to stop us from treating these transcripts like private medical records, and that's what we do. We scrub all PII, we anonymize the data right after we're done recording on the user's phone. By the time it hits our HIPAA-compliant servers, it's scrubbed and anonymized. And when we're communicating between the backend and front end, TLS, HTTPS is used. So that's how we kind of encrypt data in motion. And parts of it are definitely encrypted when they're stored in our database. And the things that we store are just happy scores, historical, progress-related information, things that parents actually want to come back to. So that's how we encrypt data at rest. We follow SOC 2 compliance standards, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, industry-leading practices. But one thing we're really proud of is ORCA. It's an independent digital health assessment review board. They do a very thorough check and review of your app or services, compliance, and they look at safety and security and things like that. So we passed it, so that felt good. And I think things like the Kids Safe Seal, Mom's Choice, kind of tell other parents that we're a safe app to use. So parent-child interaction and play therapy is our focus right now. We support kids age 2 to 7. But there's definitely lots of things that we can do with the platform that we currently have and we have plans to expand into. We built kind of a neutral third-party AI engine that can analyze any two or multiple person conversation and provide feedback on that. We want to expand into couples therapy. There's a 5-minute couples version of this, which I'm excited to try out. No, do you want to use it? Like, I would love to test it out with you. Yeah, it's based off of John Gottman's like thing of deposits and withdrawals. And ideally, like you make deposits in your, I don't want to get too into this, but like you make certain deposits in your relationship, you do withdrawals, and I think you're supposed to do like 20 deposits for every one withdrawal you do or something like that, right? So we want to see how we could use John Gottman's method within the Happypillar umbrella. And we want to do that later this year, early next year, so we'll keep you posted. But there's like multiple modules that we can offer older kids too, kids aged 8 and up. There's tons of teens like working on things like social media addiction, social isolation. So we want to provide CBT and DBT for older kids as well. Speech therapy, perhaps Happypillar as like a workflow augmentation tool. But as we're doing this, really our North Star, and Scott is one of the best product managers I know who loves to talk about North Stars for product, is it responsive to the community that we're building for? We want to expand into Spanish because we have lots of parents that speak Spanish in their households. But it's not as simple as just adding a Spanish language pipeline, which we can all do within a day or two, right? It's more than that. Praise wasn't a big thing for me in my household growing up, and it's not. Praise works differently in different cultures, right? So we want to be culturally inclusive and mindful of that. And we want to contract with the right therapist and linguist to offer Spanish within Happypillar, or Hindi or Tagalog or something like that. And another North Star is it leading to positive outcomes for the people using it? And if we think that, expanding into something like speech therapy or adding maybe, multiple features, like, a particular feature to PCIT right now is going to lead to positive outcomes, then that's a feature that we definitely want to work on. And I have to say, I know that we all like sit through like bug grooming sessions and feature sessions. And we've done this for B2B enterprise and, they're fine, they're productive, whatever. But some of the customer grooming sessions at Happypillar are so fun because we get emails like, hey, here are all of the things that are wrong with your app. I can't use it, I can't get into it, there's a microphone issue. But then one customer included a picture of his kid and was like, but thank you for helping her. And I was like, fuck, like this is so cool. Like it's amazing to get this kind of customer feedback. So yeah, overall it's been fun, and I can't wait to continue the conversation with all of you. Thank you.